I want to thank everyone who's joining us live today, and also everyone who's tuning in to the recorded version of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the SACNAS website for as long as the nomination materials are open this summer. So my name is Charlotte Lambert. I'm your SACNAS president this year. I'm a Haida and Tsimshian and an enrolled member of the Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. I'm a genome scientist by training. I'm the current DEI officer at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York. And the purpose of today's webinar is to just provide an overview to the nominations and elections processes for the SACNAS Board of Directors, the processes that are in place for this year, 2023. We'll do this first. I'll start by providing some general overview information and showing some slides just to orient you to kind of everything that's going to happen this year with respect to nominations and elections. And then the second part of today's webinar will be a kind of informal conversation with a number of current members of the SACNAS Board of Directors. We all have different paths into board service. We all have very different sort of perspectives, experiences in our STEM disciplines and fields. And I think it's important for you all to know all of those different stories if you're considering running for the SACNAS Board of Directors this year. So you can type questions that you might have into the Q&A box. It will come directly to all of us who are panelists on this webinar. We'll be able to see it. There'll be some time at the end of today's webinar to take some live questions if there are any. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll see them come through even though you won't necessarily see them being recorded in the Q&A box. All right, so we'll get started here just with a couple of slides in the first part of this webinar. So here are a couple of reasons. There are a lot of different reasons for why any of us would decide to nominate ourselves or run for the SACNAS Board of Directors. Here's a couple of the most common ones that I see. Perhaps you want to help ensure effective governance and strategic planning for SACNAS as an organization. We all want to work in partnership with the SACNAS staff to carry out the mission and goals of the organization. I would say one of the common characteristics of all of us who serve on the Board of Directors is that we're very, very passionate about the programs and services that SACNAS offers its membership. And we all want to work in partnership with the SACNAS staff to help sort of carry out the goals and the mission of the organization. Another big reason to run for the SACNAS Board of Directors is to ensure fiduciary sustainability, to protect the assets of the organization, and also to provide financial oversight for SACNAS. And then another common reason is to serve as a powerful advocate and voice for the organization. One of the kind of big duties of serving on the SACNAS Board of Directors is to facilitate partnerships, to open doors to either programmatic or financial fundraising partnerships that would benefit SACNAS as an organization. And so being on the Board of Directors gives you a platform to be able to serve as a powerful advocate for everything that SACNAS does. But these are just a couple of the reasons. Maybe they resonate with some of you who are listening in. In 2023, there will be 5 open positions on the board. The president-elect position is open. 3 general positions are open, and 1 graduate student position on the Board of Directors is open. The length of terms for each of these, the president-elect is essentially a 4-year commitment. The person who's elected this year to be president will serve as president-elect / vice president in 2024. They will be president and lead the Board of Directors in 2025 and 2026. And they will be the immediate past president / vice president again in 2027. So it'll essentially be a 4-year commitment for the person who is elected this fall. The general and the student seats on the board are both 3 years. And so the people who are elected for those positions will serve 2024 through 2026. So just a quick overview of what the elections timeline looks like this year. We're here today, June 13th, in this informational webinar. The nomination system will open later this week, and it will be open for a full month for people who are interested in submitting self-nomination materials. You'll have a month to be able to do that through the SACNAS website. In August, after the nomination system closes, the Nominations Subcommittee will meet to select the slate of candidates that will be recommended to the Board of Directors for elections. I'll talk a little bit about the Nominations Subcommittee in the next slide. The election system will open up in conjunction with the 50th anniversary conference in Portland, Oregon in late October. It'll be open for a month also. And that'll be the chance when the entire SACNAS membership will be able to vote on the slate of candidates presented by the board. And so professional members will be able to vote on for president and the general board seats, and the student members of SACNAS will be able to vote for president and the student board seat. And then after elections close in December, the election results will be returned and announced to the membership. And the terms of service for everybody who's elected, all 5 people, will start January 1st, 2024. Okay, so the Nominations Subcommittee, the important thing I think to know about this is that everyone who submits nomination materials sort of puts their hat in the ring to run for the Board of Directors will not end up on the slate that is voted on by the membership. And that's because there's a process that the Nominations Subcommittee goes through. They are charged with reading through all of the nomination materials and the candidates who submit them and putting together a slate that aligns well with what is needed on the board. And in the next slide, I'll talk to you, sort of in more detail about some of the criteria that they're looking for. So the Nomination Subcommittee reviews and discusses all of the applications and the nomination materials that come in. And they are charged with doing that and then recommending the best slate of candidates as defined by what is needed, what characteristics are needed on the board right now or for the next couple of years. So what are some of those nomination criteria that the subcommittee is looking for? We're looking for current SACNAS members. So anybody who runs for the SACNAS Board of Directors must have a current SACNAS membership, and they must also have experience in a number of different areas. So the first area is STEM, diversity, and inclusion. This can be through SACNAS, either through committee work or through chapters or through prior service in SACNAS, leading SACNAS programs or on the Board of Directors. It can also be through your home institutions. But the goal of SACNAS, as you all know, is to advance our members through STEM careers and then positions of leadership. And so we want people on the Board of Directors who have a whole variety of experiences in STEM diversity and inclusion, in training and education, in different kinds of careers, and also in positions of leadership. The second area that we're looking for in terms of experience on the SACNAS Board of Directors is organizational governance. So facility with and kind of strong familiarity with how work gets done via committees, by executive boards, via advisory boards, things like that. Again, this could be through prior experience with SACNAS or through experience with local institutions or your home institutions. We're also looking for people who have professional relationships with national organizations, companies across the US, different funding agencies, things like that. And as I mentioned, this is because one of the big responsibilities of people who are on the Board of Directors is to basically open and facilitate and steward relationships with organizations that can become either financial or programmatic partners with SACNAS going forward. And finally, we're also looking for people on the board with experience in team-based leadership. Running for the Board of Directors is all about sort of putting the organization first. We all have our own individual passions, and that's what brings us here. But the board is designed to work as a team, and as a team with very, very diverse interests and experiences and perspectives. so that it works collectively stronger than any individual person might work on their own. And so we're really looking for people with experience in team-based leadership, getting things done on a team with very diverse backgrounds, very diverse experiences. To that point, the Nominations Subcommittee also considers diversity across many different dimensions when assembling the slate of recommended candidates, and this can change a lot from year to year depending on what's represented on the board in a given year. And so the Nominations Committee looks for diversity in terms of things like gender and race, ethnicity, of course, indigeneity. It also looks for diversity in terms of STEM discipline, in terms of kind of institution type, in terms of geographic location, in terms of sector, so academic versus government versus nonprofit versus private industry or representation from different companies. And so that can change pretty drastically because the demographics on the board can change pretty drastically from year to year. But the Nominations Subcommittee also considers that because it is, we think it is really important to assemble a board that has very diverse perspectives so that we can collectively be really good representatives of the entire SACNAS membership. So something that's worth, I think, mentioning on its own is a financial contribution. So SACNAS board members give personal, annual, unrestricted contributions to SACNAS that is consistent with their financial situations. And I want to call this out on its own slide because I want to recognize that this is unusual, I think, for many of us to come into an organization and be expected to, sort of give financially. Many of us come from communities that don't have a lot of financial resources. We come from families that don't have a lot of means. We're used to giving of ourselves. We're used to sort of volunteering ourselves in order to make things happen. But financial contributions are often much more difficult because many of us have lots of different financial responsibilities to our families and to our communities. But being on the board of directors, there is this expectation, and it's really important for two reasons. So one is as we work to continue to kind of diversify the funding that SACNAS uses in order to implement its programs and services, individual giving is a big important part of that. And the SACNAS board of directors needs to lead by example for that. The other reason is in the nonprofit world in the US, in order to be able to leverage, sort of the organizational governance and raise more money from that, it's really, really important to say that 100% of the board of directors for an organization, SACNAS in this case, gives a personal annual unrestricted contribution. So the important metric there is that 100% of the board gives. It's not, each individual gives at least this much. It could be $5 to $10 a month. It could be much more than that. What we try to get to is collectively as a board, 100% of us give so that when the staff or when one of us go out and try to raise money from other organizations that aren't currently partnered with SACNAS, we can say that 100% of the board gives. And then this is in addition to opening the doors to other funding relationships, securing external funds, stewarding donors for SACNAS. So the individual financial contribution is in addition to anything else we might do for SACNAS. Okay, so nuts and bolts, just time commitment. I think this is the last slide that I have. The time commitment for serving on the SACNAS board of directors. There are 2 in-person board meetings each year at locations within the United States, plus 4 more video conference meetings. So it averages out to about 1 board meeting every other month. And then in between that, there's committee and working group leadership that takes place. So board members at some point during their 3 to 4 year terms end up chairing at least 1 committee or subcommittee. And then they're also assigned various projects, task groups, temporary working groups that come up as appropriate to their talents and experience. And so this is another reason why it's really important to have a whole diversity of perspective and experiences and backgrounds on the board of directors, because the work that we do requires that sort of outside of the formal structure of standing committees and subcommittees that are posted on the SACNAS website. All right, so I think that's everything that I have in terms of just general information. The detailed information, we'll put it in the chat, links to the pages on the SACNAS website where you can find detailed information about board service and the nominations process and the materials that are needed for you to nominate yourself if you choose this year to run for the board of directors. And we'll also put a link in there of where to email for more information if you have questions. All right, so I'm going to stop the slides right now. I'm going to get out of this and we're going to move to the second part of the webinar, which is just an informal conversation with a number of people on the board right now who are tuned in as panelists for this webinar. And what's going to happen here is that each one of the people that you see on the screen will have sort of 2 to 3 minutes to talk about their path into board service, why they decided to run, the kinds of things that they work on now that they're on the board of directors, things like that. So I will start because I realized I didn't say this as part of my introduction. I rotated onto the board as president last year, 2022. And this is my second term on the board. I was on the board as a general board member previously, 2012 to 2015, and I was secretary for 2 of those years. So I was in one of the executive offices for 2 of those years. And my reasons for running the first time were very different. It was more, learning more, what can I do to sort of help SACNAS run smoothly. And my reasons for running for the presidency last year were, I was in a different place in my career, and I was definitely in a place where I felt like I could give back to SACNAS very strategically. I've benefited from so many of SACNAS's programs and services, from a graduate student to a postdoc to a professional. So I've taken part in the leadership programs. I was the part of opening a chapter. I've been to the conference every year. I really rely on sort of the community and the friends and the colleagues that I've gotten to know very well over the years. And so I wanted, I wanted to run for president basically to help give back to the organization and make sure that it runs smoothly for future generations of SACNAS members. Okay, so with that, let me take a look. I think maybe I'll start with Lee, if that's okay. So Lee Bitsui, he's Dene from the Navajo Nation. He's the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Brandeis University, just outside of Boston. And Lee, you have also served on the SACNAS Board of Directors previously. Can you describe a little bit about that experience and why you decided to run for the board again last year?
Yes, thank you, Charla. Hello, everyone who's in attendance. Nice to see all of you. And I was just thinking about that when you were talking about the first time you were on the board, because there was some overlap between our terms. And I served as a member of the board of directors from 2011 to 2013, if memory serves me correct. And I also served as secretary. And at that time, I was really passionate about my involvement with SACNAS, and the way that I entered the SACNAS role was actually through admissions when I was working at Dartmouth College. But when I realized that SACNAS was just a welcoming and inclusive environment, then I shifted my interest toward more advocacy work. And then when I began my research portfolio in bioethics, it was also an opportunity for me to become an advocate. And also I wanted to increase the Indigenous representation on the board and throughout the organization. So that was then. And why did I want to run again this time around? Those 3 things are still there. The passion is still there, the advocacy work, and then the Indigenous reputation, all of the representation, all of that was very important to me. But now I'm in a different place where I have the wherewithal. I have more relationships and more connections than I did before. here's some examples. I'm on the editorial board for Insight into Diversity, where I was able to pitch an article ideas commemorating the 50th anniversary of SACNAS. And we were able to get together as a team and submit an article, and that is slated for publication later on this year. Another way is through the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. So as a member, I'm able, and so is Charla, and so we're able to network with organizers and also the membership there to really increase the level of awareness of SACNAS. And another way that I'm able to advance the work of SACNAS is through my connections with foundations, which I didn't have before. And now I can reach out to people if we do have an idea. I am connected to people that will be interested in what we're able to present to them. So again, the wherewithal. It's also about not only serving as a connector, but also I have I'm looking at my notes here, the institutional support here from Brandeis. There's also engagement. I've also become a DEI thought leader. And then my ability to contribute to the organization has increased by a lot. And so I'm able to support, for example, the recognition and the awards that go to research presenters and posters from tribal colleges and universities. So that's where part of my passion is. And that's where I'm at now, as opposed to where I was at, 10 years ago now. So it's an exciting time to be part of SACNAS. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Lee. So Lisa Trevino, she is the Vice President of Operations at the nonprofit DHR Health Institute for Research and Development in South Texas. And Lisa rotated on the board just last year. She's one of our brand new board members. So she has about 6 months experience now to draw on. But Lisa, can you describe your history with SACNAS and what prompted you to run for the board last year?
Well, excuse me. Thank you, Charla. Thank you, everyone. It's always good to see my colleagues on the board. I currently serve as the Vice President of Operations at the DHR Health Institute for Research and Development. We are in South Texas, literally the southernmost tip of Texas before we get into Mexico. And I give you a little bit of how I got here. I'm a PhD level molecular biologist. I went to grad school at UC Santa Cruz and worked in MCD Bio there. I'm a bench scientist by training, and then moved into the more translational side of research, doing a postdoc at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and then looping back around to Texas at Baylor College of Medicine at the Human Genome Sequencing Center. Coming back to the Rio Grande Valley, our parent health system recognized the need of clinical trials here in the Rio Grande Valley, where we serve a population of greater than 90% Hispanic, highly underserved community, highly under-accessed community. And, I felt, that it was important for me to come back. This is my home. And so since then, we've been able to push education, health literacy to the community here. And it's been a really, really rewarding experience, just seeing how we are empowering the community with education and information about their disease state and how it affects them and their families and generations to come. I think my passion for science really started with SACNAS. SACNAS was my first scientific meeting. I think I was an undergraduate going into my master's. And I remember being there, and I remember just being exposed to different universities, different health systems, different companies, and really that camaraderie and passion that was brought to by the SACNAS community. It's something that I think all of us here feel, but it's kind of hard to kind of describe exactly what that feeling is. But it's something that really drove me to continue in science and to be that mentor to younger SACNistas. So when I had the opportunity to run to be on the board, I felt I really needed to do that so that I could communicate to the students and to the professionals, at SACNAS. I was you. I started where you're at. And this is my journey, and sharing my journey and the possibilities that became endless by attending SACNAS, and being exposed, and really just the trust that I was able to gain, for myself and my colleagues at SACNAS. So it's been a tremendous honor to be part of SACNAS throughout my education and professional career. And now that I'm on the board, I want to serve as that ambassador also to our students and our STEM community and community at large. Promote the mission of SACNAS, which is incredible, right? Exposure to our students to dive into STEM and the opportunities that are available to them. I look forward to being part of SACNAS for many, many years. So again, I think I'm just so excited to give back and so excited to be a part of this community.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Lisa. There's so many great stories within, sort of the SACNAS membership that what you just talked about. Pam Padilla, she's the immediate past president, who many people in the audience, I'm sure, have heard from or know about. So very similar. So started in SACNAS as an undergraduate, and now, SACNAS president, and, she's high in leadership at her home institution in North Texas. And so the power that SACNAS has, as your first research presentation, your first scientific conference. There's so many stories like the one that you just described. All right, I think we will move next to Zeke. So Ezequiel Zeke Barrera is a toxicologist and the research safety director in the Office of Research at the University of Georgia, Athens. So Zeke, you have an interesting story of how you were introduced to SACNAS also. Can you describe that, and then also how it connects to why you ultimately decided to run for the board of directors?
Well, thank you, Charla. And like was mentioned before, it's always good to go ahead and feel at home. And I always feel at home when I'm with SACNAS, and particularly as my fellow board members and my community membership within the SACNAS groups. So for me, it's been a journey that started off basically kind of like very similar to other people's. I grew up in Southern California. My mom is a Zapotec Indian from Southern Mexico. And my dad is from Central Mexico in a state called Michoacan in Morelia. And I met in California, and was born and raised there. So as a first generation American, I had basically, if I was good in school, and I didn't know a lick of English back then, it was one of those things I excelled in math and science, and because I was doing well on that, my parents said, well, you can either work in the fields, because my dad traditionally started off as a field hand in the onion and citrus fields, and then later on became a welder. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, or sometimes worked at housekeeping type of duties. And they mentioned that education is very important. And one of the things that I saw among my peers and everything else is that a lot of my peers weren't continuing on their education, and I felt an obligation to at least try to get to a better place where I can probably help out later. So I always had that feeling of giving back, but I haven't really identified with SACNAS back then. Basically, my parents basically said that, hey, you have three career choices. If you're going to go professional, you can be an engineer, you can be a medical doctor, or you can be a lawyer. And those were the three. And not knowing any better, I said, okay, well, I'm pretty good at helping people and everything else. So I'll be a medical doctor. So I did that. And one of the things that I found out later on, I did well in school, but in high school, my counselor didn't look at my courses that I took and everything else, and didn't advise me that I need to take an entrance exam to get into college. And I think that that's something that has to be changed, and I'm sure it is by now. But it was something that occurred to me. So I went to junior college for 2 years. And then later on, I kind of opened up internally, because I was very shy to begin with, and then later on opened up. And one of the things that was very striking is that once I made the transition from a junior college to University of California, Irvine, I met my peers that are also going into medical school. Chicanos for Creative Medicine was one of my groups. But at one of these meetings, Dr. Hilo Rodriguez, one of the early founders of SACNAS, mentioned that, hey, we need people to go ahead and represent us, Native Americans, indigenous people of the Americas in the sciences. I'm glad that you're going into medical school or thinking about that, but consider, doing a research project and everything else. And he gave me the first opportunity. And I don't have time to go into it in great detail, but basically I got a project working with an anthropologist and finding what chimpanzees try to treat themselves in the wild when they were ill. And we did the chemical workup. We found out that this is the active compound in this ficus plant that the chimpanzees were checking out. And to make a long story short, it allowed me to get into graduate school. I was third overall in the excellence in research at the University of California. I did my graduate studies at MIT. I went into toxicology. And just like some things that happen, you have a door that opens up and then something happens and the door closes. But then what's so great about SACNAS and everything else is that you got the support and they go ahead and tell you that, hey, don't feel down on yourself. Go ahead and see what other opportunities are. And another door opened up, and that's how I got in from a traditional research type of career path, which I thought was going to be the end all be all, to a kind of like a support group. As a toxicologist, I work in research administration. And within my group, I'm particularly involved with research enterprise. And it's one of those things that I've been able to give back, to give other people, says, hey, if you're interested in SACNAS, we have not only people that are professionals and leaders within the academic field, we can introduce you to that, but also there's a support network growing among the different universities and nonprofit institutions that you can go ahead and tap into. So basically, I was introduced to SACNAS in the 90s, and then there was like a break in between where I was focusing on my career and my education. And then there was a point where it says, okay, now I feel comfortable enough that I want to go ahead and give back. So we started off being a mentor, and then later on being a judge. And then later on it says, okay, well, there's openings in for a board member. So let me go ahead and see, because I want to give back. It was basically paying it forward, because Eli helped me. And one of the things I would like to go ahead and do is kind of do my contribution for our group of SACNistas here. And I always refer to, career paths in STEM and other career paths are basically a cobbled road where each of us lay our own stone that other people go ahead and step and move forward with as they go to their next destination. And that's how I end up being involved with the board. Some of the things that I do on the board, I'm on the audit committee. I also was on the executive director search. I currently chair the membership committee. I'm the chair of the annual conference code of conduct, and also on the finance committee. So you say, hey, there's a lot of different committees. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's also very fulfilling. And I encourage people to go ahead and get involved, because what you're doing is basically allowing SACNAS your point of perspective and working as a group to go ahead and make the organization better and to go ahead and be strong for the future generations. So that's why I decided to go ahead and run for the board. And I'm completing my third year now.
Yes, I love that story. Thank you, Zeke. Also, I'm going to use that metaphor now. So yeah, career paths are a cobbled road. I love that. Okay, so I think we'll move to our two student members right now who are on this call. Our two student members, board of the directors. We'll start with Shaimar. So Shaimar Gonzalez Morales, she's a graduate student at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. So Shaimar, what are some of the things that you've gotten to work on and what you've gotten to represent since you were elected to the board as a student member?
So first of all, I serve currently in two committees, the presentations committee, student presentations committee, as well as the chapters committee. So for instance, in the presentations committee, we review abstracts for incoming abstracts and serve also as a mentor judge. And I'm one of those people that if you're presenting will be moving forward in the conference and help you with your how to set your posters for your presentations. In terms of the chapters, I was a chair last year, and currently I'm just a member from the committee. And one of the things that I wanted to focus during my time as a chair was to just increase the communication between the Native Americans and Indigenous committee, so that their work also and our work are parallel, and that we work together in creating more spaces and more integrated, basically, the work that they're doing to our committee. And another thing that I focus as part of that committee is to just trying to increase diversity within our chapters, so that there are more diverse STEM fields that are represented, such as social science, engineering, computer science, math, etc. And in terms of the board of directors, so before entering to the board, I was a president in the chapters that I started with a group of people or other students at UT Health San Antonio. And there I have also the opportunity to serve during the local conference organization committee for SACNAS for the 2018 SACNAS conference. That also inspired me a little bit to see, okay, I really like to not only give back to my school and provide a community where students have our field that are represented, that they have a community that support them, but also have additional training that might not be accessible in our school itself, so that they become more competitive as they move into the next generation. So these entrance to the board just come more into the training that I have into BioIcorps, which is sort of more like an incubator, as well as work with International Center of Development, or ICDP, which have different programs that is focused more into biotech industry. So my focus mainly into the board was to just bring those connections on the industry sectors in terms of the biotech. And one thing also is that I'm not only a student at UT Health San Antonio, but I'm also a student at University of Baltimore, University of Maryland, Baltimore County in the Computer Science and Electrical Engineering department. So that's also, I also wanted to increase diversity within those fields and work on that aspect, and create also connections for the organizations that are within the engineering and computer science departments in terms of industry and organizations. In addition to that, one of my work on SACNAS has been to increase the work that we do in terms of the disability sectors. I'm also a disability advocate, and I work with the National Academy of Sciences, mathematics, engineering. So, and there we work with a different aspect of just increasing these the aspect of accessibility within disability in academia. It is unfortunately a sector that we still have a lot of discrimination in that aspect. So in terms of being in the board, is just trying to help the organization with different aspects of accessibility as we move forward in the organization. And I think I covered most of it. Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm glad that you ended on that point, Shamar. So for all of you in the audience, I know that SACNAS is focused on two groups in particular, but it's an inclusive organization focused on Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native American Indigenous peoples in the US in advancing in STEM careers. But we're really focused on intersectional identities, and so members of disability communities, members of LGBT communities, we're always looking for perspectives representing those communities as well to make sure that we as SACNAS provide kind of the supports and the programming in the community needed for everybody's intersectional identities. Okay, so I think we'll move to our other student board member right now, Lauren Uwelin McCluster-Davis. She's Oneida and recently earned her PhD and is soon to be the Director of Indigenous Science Advocacy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. An important point about Uwelin, this is something that's written in the details of if you're interested in running for one of the student board members, you have to be a graduate student at the time that you nominate yourself. Uwelin has 1 more year on board service. She won't be a student member, but she'll still be, sort of bridging the gap between being a student board member and stepping into her first position post-PhD. So Uwelin, can you talk about the kinds of things that you've worked on and represented since being elected as a student board member?
Yawanko Charla, Segwele Segwe Yolun Nyungats. Hi everyone, I'm Uwelin McCluster-Davis, and as Charla said, I just got my PhD. So I started with SACNAS as a board member while I was still a graduate student, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to be more involved in SACNAS is they had a major role in my decision to go get a PhD, where I went to get a PhD, and helping me find the sorts of opportunities that have helped cultivate my career. So when I was an undergraduate student, I went to SACNAS for the first time, and one of the key things I was looking for was graduate programs that were really passionate about Indigenous students and supporting Indigenous students. And that's how I ended up finding my PhD program. They were tabling at SACNAS. And I remember talking to, other Native students there, and we were talking about different graduate programs, different medical schools, all these sorts of things that we were interested in. And, we really said, why would I want to go to a program or a school that isn't here at SACNAS? Like, these are the people who care about me and my identity and what I bring to the table. So it was a major role in my career trajectory. And now I wanted to get involved as a graduate student because there weren't many Native students where I went for my PhD program. And I wanted to really experience the broader community that SACNAS on a national level has. So I currently chair the Native American and Indigenous Affairs Committee, and I also chair the subcommittee for chapters, which then means I also serve on the programs committee, as chapters is a subcommittee of programs. And so in both of those roles, I really try to bring an Indigenous student perspective. So for the Native American and Indigenous Affairs Committee, we talk a lot about how SACNAS can best serve our Native relatives and what that looks like on a national and local level. And so I've really enjoyed working with all these other amazing Indigenous scientists who are on this committee as well. They're just fantabulous people. And even if you're interested in the board, but you're not entirely sure, starting out with a committee can be incredibly helpful. So signing up to be on one of the committees can really dip your feet into what SACNAS looks like and how we work and what we do. And just their volunteering of their time on the Native American and Indigenous Affairs committees, when there's so amazing people and have so much accomplished already in their careers, has really taught me a lot as well. So that's why I've enjoyed serving as a student there. And then in the chapter subcommittee, serving as the chair there, we're working on a lot of different things, but one of the primary responsibilities is to really identify chapters and work on which ones will be approved as official status, which ones can be provisional status chapters for their first year after they apply, and then identifying the ones that get best chapter awards every year. And it's really amazing to see all the different students that are working really hard at our chapters across the country. And then also our growth that we've had in professional chapters lately has been really amazing as well. So just learning all about the areas across the country as a student that SACNAS is really well represented in, and what SACNistas at those different locations really enjoy about their home institution or their home company really has been hugely beneficial for my personal growth. And I really like to work with all the different people involved with chapters, because it's usually previous advisors of chapters or current advisors of chapters and the students who are really passionate about supporting chapters that we have across the country. So again, if you're interested in the board, but you're not entirely sure you want to make that full commitment, because it's a big commitment, but you're very interested in some specific thing that we do on one of our committees or subcommittees, I highly encourage you to reach out to volunteer your time for those as well. Thank you, Charla.
Sure, thanks, Joellen. So I will absolutely second that. I'm going to ask where we'll put a link to the committees page in the chat also for your reference. And that has a description of all of the standing and programmatic committees that SACNAS works with and under kind of year round. There's lots of other sort of task force and working groups that crop up individually, but the link that we'll put in the chat describes all of the standing committees that we have, as well as links from that page where you can express interest if you are interested in volunteering your time with a committee or a subcommittee right now. One quick point before we move on to our last board member. So Shaimar and Joellen are really great examples of student board members sort of fully participating on the board. And so you might think that, you know, there's a distinction between sort of president seats, general board seats, professional members, and the student board members. And that's not actually the case. So the student board members participate fully because they're passionate about it, because they have experience, because their perspectives are totally necessary and valued as representing, you know, graduate students, undergraduate students also. And it's very important for SACNAS and the SACNAS Board of Directors to have the student board members participate as, you know, sort of fully board members, not there, you know, just sort of to audit and listen in. You can tell from both of them that they're really active and involved in lots of different aspects of SACNAS that they're passionate about. All right, so our last board member today is Martha Davila Garcia. She's an associate professor of pharmacology at Howard University's College of Medicine in Washington, D.C. And the reason why she has the last word is because Martha is finishing up 2 consecutive terms on the board. So she's coming up on the end of 6 years on the board. And I think she has served on just about every committee, subcommittee, task force, and working group there has been in the past 6 years. So Martha, so based on your wealth of experiences on the board of directors, what advice or insight would you give to somebody who's considering running this year?
So I was thinking about, you know, all the things that I actually have done. And I think that one of the things that I want to put across is that when I actually nominated myself for SACNAS, I had very little experience with a lot of things. I didn't really had worked in a lot of committees. I was passionate about it because I had actually experienced SACNAS as a representative for my society, which was the American Society of Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics. They send me every year to SACNAS, and I loved it. But I really had this imposter syndrome that I didn't think I was going to be good enough, or, you know, I was prepared enough to serve. I didn't have any administrative experience except, you know, writing grants as a researcher. And little did I know that by really, you know, putting my foot forward and jumping into this particular position, I was going to find myself with all the strengths and all the things that I have actually now embraced as part of who I am and how much I've grown since I started as a SACNAS board of directors. So that's one of my peeve things is, you know, you really think sometimes that you don't have the skill set that you need, and you can really sometimes shortchange yourself because, you know, all of us have such a fantastic set of just, you know, wonderful, I think, superpowers really that can propel us in a lot of different ways. I'm just going to end because I really would like to hear from the people that are trying to apply for these positions. As board members, I'm the treasurer. I'm the chair of the finance committee, and I've served, like Charla said, in probably every single committee that has ever been. So I'm just going to stop there and say, you know, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask.
Perfect. Thank you, Martha. So there's a couple of things in the chat. I'll talk just in case there are people in the audience who want to put questions in the Q&A box. So Lisa wrote in that she serves on the Finance and Audit Committee. So those are her committee responsibilities for this first year that she's on the board. Lee wrote in that he serves on the Native American and Indigenous Affairs Committee, a longtime member of that committee, in fact. And since rotating back onto the board in this term, he serves on the Grants and Development Subcommittee and the Leadership Initiative Subcommittee. And in that capacity, he reviews the program applications for the Leadership Institutes, and then also volunteers separately to review abstracts, to review conference session proposals. And then Shaimar wrote in that she also works to increase representation of SACNAS in Puerto Rico as being a student, as part of being a student member on the board. Her focus was to increase and strengthen the connections with the local organizations like Ciencia Puerto Rico. And in that capacity, they were able to put SACNAS in the local newspaper as part of the conference activities last year. And currently, because of the conference and because of the work of Shaimar and local organizing committee in last year's conference, there's been an increase in chapter applications from Puerto Rico, from the island, which is fantastic. All right, I'll stop there and check one more time to see if there are any questions coming in. And if not, we're about 5 minutes under time, so everybody gets 5 minutes back. Marilu, are there any questions that have come in?
Yes. There is a question that says, will the graduate student member receive travel funds for the board meetings?
Yes, so yes, would one of our student members yes, like to answer that? So the policy is that where possible, SACNAS board members either through their institutions, mostly through their institutions, pay their way for in-person board meetings as a way of giving back to the organization. But as with the individual giving, we know that student board members are not always in a position to do that. And so I can turn it over to either Shaimar or Yawelin to field that question.
Yeah, I would say in my experience as a student board member that SACNAS has met me where I'm at financially, and that it has not caused more financial stress for me.
Yeah, anything to add, Shaimar?
No, I think if that is a concern, is something that you can work with the organization in terms of this is the amount I can do, and if unfortunately you cannot do anything in terms of for travel, yeah, they can help you out and cover your travel fees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't make that to be a limitation for you're not applying to the board.
Yes, exactly. I would agree with that, Shaimar. So anything with individual giving or with financial resources, the board and SACNAS as an organization knows that graduate students, are in a very different place than the professionals who run for the general board. And so, yes, please don't make financial constraints if you're a student a reason for you to not run for the board if you have all of the other experience and you're really passionate about representing something in the work that the board does.
And can I add one more thing about that? Is that if you actually apply as a student, you can also get travel awards if we have money to pay for undergraduates and graduate students to the conference. So I would like for anybody that wants to attend to just apply for those travel awards. And you can apply as a board member as well. It doesn't matter.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, so I think that's it. So I want to thank everybody again who's tuning in live for this, also who's tuning in to the recording of this. I want to thank the board members who took time out of their busy days to join us and share with you some of their stories about their history with SACNAS and their path into board service and some of the things that they're working on. There's a bunch of links in the chat. There's a link to the nominations page with all of the details about the nominations process and the materials that are required. If you have any questions, you can email elections@sacnas.org. And there's also now a link to the committees page where you can learn more about the structure of SACNAS committees and how you might volunteer for one of those or express interest in volunteering for one of those if you're not ready to nominate yourself for the board of directors yet this year. All right, and with that, I'll tune out for today. Thanks again for coming, everyone. I appreciate your time and appreciate you listening in.